I wasn't dreaming. She was really there, standing at my bedroom door in the middle of the night, dressed in a silk slip so thin it was practically see-through. The hallway light behind her outlined the curves of her body, the way the fabric clung to her skin, the soft rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" she asked, voice smooth, teasing. My throat went dry. "Evelyn," I managed to say, my voice hoarse. "What are you doing here?" She tilted her head slightly, letting her fingers trail along the doorframe. I couldn't sleep. A small pout formed on her lips as she took a step inside without waiting for my permission. "Your father isn't home. The house feels so empty when he's away." I should have stopped her. I should have told her to leave. But I didn't. Evelyn had always been beautiful, too beautiful for my father, I often thought. He was a man twice her age, a businessman who spent more time in his office than at home. She was young, poised, and dangerously alluring. But she was also off-limits. Or at least she should have been. She walked closer, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. I could smell her perfume. Something floral, intoxicating, mixed with the warmth of her skin. The scent wrapped around me, made my head spin. She stopped at the edge of my bed, her eyes locked onto mine. "You're staring," she whispered, a hint of amusement in her voice. I tore my gaze away, but it was too late. The damage was done. I had already looked too long, lingered too much on the delicate straps of her slip, the smooth skin of her shoulders, the curve of her thighs barely hidden beneath the fabric. Evelyn lifted her hand and traced a single finger down my chest, over the thin cotton of my shirt. The touch was light, barely there, but it sent a shiver down my spine. "I see the way you look at me, Adrian." Her voice was softer now, almost a murmur. "You try to hide it, but I notice everything." I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to shift back. "You should go." "Do you really want me to?" The question hung in the air, heavy, suffocating. I wanted to say yes. I needed to say yes. But my body betrayed me, the tension coiling in my muscles, the heat pressing against my skin. Evelyn smiled, as if she already knew my answer. Slowly, deliberately, she climbed onto the bed, straddling my lap before I could react. My breath hitched. The silk of her slip slid against my thighs, warm and smooth, and suddenly, she was everywhere. Her scent, her heat, the press of her body against mine. "This is wrong," I muttered, even as my hands found their way to her hips. She leaned in, her lips brushing against my ear. "Then stop me." I didn't. Her mouth found mine, soft at first, testing, teasing. Then I kissed her back. Harder, deeper, my fingers tightening around her waist. She made a sound against my lips, something between a sigh and a moan, and it drove me insane. My hands roamed up her back, pushing aside the thin straps of her slip. The fabric slid down, pooling at her waist, revealing bare skin that glowed under the dim light. She was perfect, every inch of her. Evelyn rocked against me, her breath hot against my neck. "Touch me," she whispered. I did. There was no hesitation now, no second thoughts. My hands explored her body, traced the curve of her spine, the swell of her breasts. Her nails dug into my shoulders as she moved, slow and deliberate, grinding against me until my mind was nothing but static. She kissed me again, hungrier this time, her fingers slipping beneath my shirt, nails dragging across my skin. I groaned, flipping her onto the mattress, pressing her beneath me. Her legs wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer, deeper, until there was nothing between us. The room was too hot, the air too thick. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. But I didn't stop. I didn't want to. Evelyn arched beneath me, her lips parted, eyes dark with something I couldn't name. "Adrian," I swallowed hard, bracing myself above her. "Tell me to stop." She didn't. Instead, she pulled me closer, nails scraping down my back as she whispered, "Don't stop." So I didn't. What happened after that was inevitable. a blur of heat and skin and breathless moans that left me dizzy, aching, and completely lost. When it was over, Evelyn lay beside me, her fingers tracing idle patterns on my chest. My head was still spinning, my body thrumming with the aftermath of what we had done. She sighed contentedly, pressing a soft kiss to my shoulder. I knew this would happen eventually. I turned to her, my stomach twisting. What? She smiled lazily, her fingers trailing down my arm. You can't fight fate, Adrian. Something about the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. But before I could question her, she leaned in and kissed me again, slow and deep, stealing whatever words I might have said. I should have known then. I should have seen the warning signs, the way she had planned this, the way she spoke as if she had always known this night would come. But I didn't, and by the time I realized the truth, it was far too late. I woke up to the feeling of warm fingers trailing across my chest, soft lips pressing against my shoulder. For a moment, I forgot where I was, forgot what had happened. But then I turned my head and saw her lying beside me, her body tangled with mine, her eyes dark and unreadable. Evelyn, my stepmother. Reality hit me like a tidal wave, crashing down with the weight of what we had done. My breath caught in my throat as I pulled away slightly, my mind racing. The room still smelled of her, of us. The sheets were a mess, twisted around our bodies, evidence of the night we had spent together. I needed to move. I needed to say something. But before I could, she shifted closer, resting her head against my chest. You're awake, she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. I swallowed hard. Yeah. She let out a small sigh, her fingers tracing idle patterns on my skin. You're thinking too much. How could I not? My voice came out hoarse, raw. Evelyn tilted her head up, her lips curling into a soft, knowing smile. Regrets already? I hesitated. Did I regret it? The logical part of me screamed yes, this was wrong, it should have never happened. But my body told a different story. The memory of her, the way she felt, the way she moaned my name. It was all still fresh, imprinted on my skin. I don't know, I admitted. She hummed, dragging her nails lightly down my arm. Liar. I exhaled sharply, trying to ignore the way my body reacted to her touch. Evelyn, this can't happen again. She didn't seem surprised by my words. Instead, she leaned in, brushing her lips against my jaw. If that's what you want. It wasn't, but I forced myself to nod. It is. Evelyn studied me for a moment, then slowly sat up, the silk of her slip sliding back over her skin. Even after everything, she was completely at ease, moving with the kind of confidence that made it clear. She had no regrets. I watched as she stood, smoothing down the fabric of her dress before glancing over her shoulder. Well, she said, voice playful, teasing. I should get back to my room before the staff starts wondering why I'm missing from my bed. I stared at her, my stomach twisting. You planned this, didn't you? She turned fully, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. And if I did? A cold shiver ran down my spine. She didn't wait for my response. Instead, she stepped closer, bending down until her lips hovered just over mine. Sleep well, Adrian. Then she was gone, slipping out of my room like a ghost, leaving behind nothing but the lingering scent of her perfume. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, my mind a tangled mess of confusion and desire. I had just fucked my father's wife. And worst of all, I didn't think I could stop myself from doing it again. Morning came too soon. I spent the night tossing and turning, haunted by the memory of Evelyn's touch. When I finally forced myself out of bed, the house was eerily quiet. My father was still out of town, and Evelyn, well, I had no idea what she was doing. I should have avoided her. I should have left the house, gone somewhere, anywhere. But instead, I found myself wandering downstairs, my feet carrying me to the dining room out of habit. And there she was, sitting at the table, sipping on a cup of coffee, looking as composed and elegant as ever. If she was affected by last night, she didn't show it. Morning, she greeted, her lips curving into a soft smile. I hesitated before replying. Morning. I took a seat across from her, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened when she crossed her legs beneath the silk robe she was wearing. She noticed. You look tense, she observed, tilting her head slightly. I let out a dry laugh. Can you blame me? Evelyn took another sip of her coffee before setting the cup down. Adrian, she said, voice smooth, almost soothing. What happened last night? It doesn't have to mean anything. If you don't want it to. I frowned, something about her words settling uneasily in my stomach. And if I do? She smirked, eyes glinting with something dark, something unreadable. Then that's a different story. My throat tightened. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand. Do you want it to mean something, Adrian? I should have said no. I should have walked away. But instead, I found myself watching her, taking in the way the morning light kissed her skin, the way she looked at me like she already knew the answer. And I realized she wasn't just playing a game. She was in control. Of me, of this, of everything. And that terrified me. I avoided her for the rest of the day. Or at least I tried to. I spent hours locked in my room, pretending to be busy, but my mind refused to let me forget. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, felt her. By the time evening rolled around, I knew I couldn't keep running from this. From her. I found her in the lounge, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine in hand. She looked up when I entered, her lips curving into a knowing smile. Couldn't stay away? She teased. I ignored the way my stomach flipped at her words. We need to talk, she sighed, setting her glass down. All right, talk. I hesitated, searching for the right words, but nothing felt right. Evelyn watched me, her gaze patient, expectant. You're scared, she noted. I tensed. I'm not. You are, she cut in smoothly. And that's okay. I clenched my jaw, my hands curling into fists. What do you want from me, Evelyn? She smiled. And then she stood, closing the distance between us until I could feel her breath against my skin. I want you, Adrian, she whispered. And I think you want me too. My heart pounded, my resolve crumbling as she reached up, trailing her fingers along my jaw. I should have stopped her. I should have walked away. But I didn't. And as her lips met mine again, I knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances, secret touches, and unspoken tension. I told myself that I needed to stop, that what we were doing was wrong. But every time Evelyn was near, my resolve shattered. She knew exactly what she was doing, the way she moved around me, the way she let her fingers linger just a second too long when passing me something at dinner, the way her lips curled into a smirk whenever she caught me watching her. It was a game, and I was losing. My father returned from his business trip that weekend, oblivious to the fire that had ignited in his absence. He kissed Evelyn the moment he walked through the door, and I felt something ugly twist inside me. I hated myself for it. I had no right to feel jealous. I had no right to feel anything. But when she met my gaze over his shoulder, her expression unreadable, I knew I wasn't the only one thinking about that night. That night, I still dreamt about it, the memory of her touch haunting me in ways I couldn't escape. I tried to drown myself in other distractions, throwing myself into work, going out with friends, even entertaining the idea of seeing someone else. But it was useless. No one else smelled like her, tasted like her, made my body ache the way she did. She had ruined me, and she knew it. One evening, a few days after my father's return, I found myself alone in the house with her again. He had gone out for a business dinner, and the silence between us was deafening. Evelyn sat in the living room, sipping a glass of wine, her legs curled up beneath her on the couch. She looked at me when I walked in, a small smile playing on her lips. You're avoiding me, she said simply, swirling the wine in her glass. I clenched my jaw. Shouldn't I be? She tilted her head, studying me. Is that what you really want, Adrian? To pretend this never happened? I exhaled sharply, raking a hand through my hair. What else am I supposed to do? You're my father's wife. Her lips twitched. And yet, that didn't stop you from fucking me that night, did it? I flinched at her words, my stomach tightening. She was cruel when she wanted to be, twisting the knife just enough to keep me on edge. I didn't know if she enjoyed watching me squirm, or if she was testing me, pushing me to see how far I would go. I took a slow step toward her. Why are you doing this? She set her glass down on the table, leaning back against the couch, completely at ease. Because I can. Anger flared in my chest. But it wasn't just anger. It was something darker, something dangerous. That's not an answer. She stood then, walking toward me with slow, deliberate steps. My breath hitched when she reached up, trailing a single finger down my chest. You want to know the truth, Adrian? She whispered. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. A chill ran down my spine. What the hell does that mean? She smiled, but it wasn't the teasing, seductive smile she usually wore. It was something else entirely, something almost satisfied. It means, she murmured, pressing her lips to my ear, that none of this is an accident. My blood ran cold. I stepped back, my mind racing. What are you talking about? She watched me, her expression unreadable. Do you really think I married your father for love? I stared at her, my chest tightening. I came back for you, Adrian, she continued, her voice soft, almost soothing. Not him. The room tilted, my vision swimming. That doesn't make any sense. She let out a small chuckle. Doesn't it? I shook my head. Why me? Why now? Her gaze darkened, and for the first time, I saw something beneath her carefully constructed facade. A truth she had been hiding all along. Because, she whispered, you were always supposed to be mine. The words sent a shiver down my spine. But before I could respond, she closed the distance between us again, her lips crashing against mine. I should have pushed her away. I should have demanded answers. But the second her hands tangled in my hair, the second her body pressed against mine, all rational thought vanished. I grabbed her hips, backing her up against the nearest wall, my fingers digging into her skin. She let out a soft, pleased hum, tilting her head to give me more access as I kissed down her neck, my restraint unraveling with every passing second. You drive me insane, I muttered against her skin. She smiled, threading her fingers through my hair. Good. My hands slipped beneath her dress, gripping her thighs, lifting her up as she wrapped her legs around my waist. The feeling of her, the heat of her body against mine, was intoxicating. I carried her to the couch, laying her down beneath me, my lips never leaving hers. She arched against me, her nails dragging down my back as I pushed her dress higher, exposing more of the soft, smooth skin I had craved for days. Say you want this, she whispered, her voice breathless. I looked down at her, my heart hammering. You know I do, she smirked. Then take me. And I did. Hours later, we lay tangled together, our bodies slick with sweat, our breaths uneven. She traced lazy circles on my chest, her expression thoughtful. I wanted to ask her more, wanted to demand the truth behind her cryptic words, but exhaustion weighed down on me, making it impossible to think straight. As I drifted off, I felt her press a soft kiss to my temple. Sleep well, Adrian, she murmured. We have so much more to talk about. I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to stay awake, to piece everything together. But sleep pulled me under before I could. I woke up to the feeling of warmth against my chest, the soft weight of Evelyn's body pressed against mine. My arm was draped over her waist, my fingers resting just above the curve of her hip, and for a moment, I let myself sink into the illusion that this was normal, that this was something I was allowed to have. But the second my mind cleared from the haze of sleep, reality came crashing down. I tensed, my heart pounding as memories from the night before flooded back. The way she whispered my name, the way her nails raked down my back, the way she looked at me after, with something dangerous lurking behind her satisfied smirk. and the words she had said before I drifted off. We have so much more to talk about. Carefully, I pulled away from her, sitting up as I ran a hand through my hair. My pulse was erratic, my body still thrumming from the aftermath of what we had done, but my mind refused to let me enjoy it. There were too many questions, too many things that didn't add up. Evelyn shifted beside me, letting out a soft hum as she stretched. Leaving already? Her voice was thick with sleep, her eyes half-lidded as she watched me. I swallowed hard. We need to talk. She smiled lazily, reaching out to trail her fingers along my thigh. We did plenty of that last night. I grabbed her wrist, stilling her touch. No more games, Evelyn. Tell me what you meant when you said none of this was an accident. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. You're finally ready to hear the truth? My stomach twisted. Just say it. She sat up, the silk sheets pooling around her waist, and for the first time, I noticed something different in her eyes. A quiet determination, a certainty that unnerved me more than I wanted to admit. You were never his, she said simply. My breath hitched. What? She exhaled, as if this revelation was as natural as stating the weather. Your father, the man who raised you, he isn't your real father, Adrian. The room spun. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to tell me this was some sick joke. But she didn't. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, and suddenly, I felt like the ground beneath me had been ripped away. That's not possible, I said, my voice hoarse. She reached for my hand, her fingers cool against mine. It is. I yanked my hand away, shaking my head. No. My mother. Your mother was in love with someone else before she married him. Evelyn's voice was quiet, almost gentle. Someone who should have been the one to raise you. Someone your father took away from her. I spread through my veins. Who? She held my gaze, and when she spoke, the name that left her lips shattered whatever remained of my composure. My first love. A sharp, painful breath escaped me. You're lying. She smiled, but there was no amusement in it. Am I? I felt sick. My mind raced, grasping for any possible way this could be false, but deep down, something about it felt disturbingly right. I had never looked like my father. It was something people always pointed out in passing. A harmless observation I had never questioned. But now, with Evelyn's words ringing in my ears, the pieces started falling into place in the worst possible way. Why are you telling me this? I demanded, my voice raw. Because you deserve to know the truth, she said, tilting her head. And because everything I've done, everything that's happened between us, was never about him. It was always about you. My chest tightened, a horrible realization dawning on me. You planned this, I whispered. From the moment you married him, this was always about me. She didn't deny it. I shot to my feet, pacing as my hands clenched into fists. You wanted this to happen. You wanted me to. My stomach twisted violently. Jesus Christ, Evelyn. She rose slowly, her movements controlled, deliberate. I didn't make you do anything, Adrian. I turned to her, rage and disbelief warring inside me. You manipulated me. You used me to get back at him. She let out a soft laugh. Back at him? She echoed. Oh, Adrian, you still don't get it, do you? I stared at her, my pulse thundering. Her expression shifted, something dangerous flickering in her eyes. I didn't do this to hurt him. I did this because I wanted you, because you are mine. The words sent a chill down my spine. She stepped closer, her bare skin brushing against me. Your father stole the man I loved, she murmured. He took everything from me, but he couldn't take you. And now, after all these years, I finally have you. I recoiled, horror clawing at my throat. This is insane. She exhaled, shaking her head. No, Adrian. This is fate. My hands trembled as I backed away. I can't do this, I choked out. I can't be part of whatever twisted revenge fantasy you've created. She smiled then, slow and knowing. It's too late for that. And then, just when I thought nothing could shock me more, She placed a hand on her stomach. A wave of nausea crashed over me. "You're lying," I whispered. Her smile didn't falter. "Am I?" The room felt suffocating. My mind screamed at me to run, to leave and never look back. But I couldn't move. I could only watch as she stood there, calm, composed, victorious. "I told you," she murmured, stepping closer, her voice a soft caress against my skin. "You were always supposed to be mine." I stumbled back, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But deep down, I knew it was. Evelyn had won, and I had never even stood a chance. My whole body felt numb, as if the weight of Evelyn's words had drained every ounce of life from me. She stood there, her hand resting on her stomach, her eyes fixed on mine, filled with something I could no longer decipher. Was it satisfaction, triumph, or something far more terrifying? I took a step back, my breath uneven. "This isn't real," I muttered, shaking my head. "This can't be real." Evelyn tilted her head, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "Why is it so hard for you to accept? Adrian, you've always known something was different, something was off. You just didn't want to face it." I clenched my fists. "You tricked me," I hissed. "You made me believe." "I didn't make you do anything," she interrupted, her voice smooth as silk. "Every choice you made was your own." Cold laugh escaped me. "That's bullshit. You manipulated me, Evelyn. From the very beginning you set this up. You knew exactly what you were doing." She took a slow step toward me, completely unbothered by my anger. "And if I did?" she whispered. "If I planned everything down to the very last moment, if I orchestrated every touch, every glance, every whisper, would it change the way you felt when you were inside me?" My stomach twisted violently. "Stop. Would it erase the nights you spent craving me? The way you moaned my name? The way you wanted me? Stop." My voice was hoarse, barely a whisper now. But she didn't. She reached for me, her fingers grazing my arm, and even now, even after everything, my body betrayed me. A part of me still responded to her, still wanted her, even as my mind screamed at me to run. She leaned in, her lips just inches from mine. "I told you, Adrian," she murmured. "You were always meant to be mine." A sharp, searing pain stabbed through my chest, the realization crashing over me like a tidal wave. There was no escape, no way out of this twisted, inescapable web she had woven around me. She had taken everything, my innocence, my trust, my very identity, and twisted it into something I could never undo. My hands trembled as I gritted my teeth. "You're sick," she laughed softly. "Sick?
No, darling.
I'm just a woman who takes what she wants. And I wanted you." I turned away, forcing myself to breathe, to think. I couldn't stay here. I had to get out. My father, he needed to know. He needed to see who she really was, what she had done. I spun toward the door, but her voice stopped me cold. "You're not going to tell him." I turned back, fury boiling inside me. "Watch me," she sighed, shaking her head. "Adrian, you still don't understand, do you?" I clenched my jaw. "Understand what?" Her smile was cruel, victorious. "If you tell him, what do you think will happen? You think he'll hate me? Divorce me? Kick me out of his life?"
Ich klärte her.
"That's exactly what's going to happen." She took another step toward me, her eyes gleaming with amusement.
No.
"Sweetheart, that's not what's going to happen." I frowned, unease creeping up my spine. "What the hell are you talking about?" She let out a soft, delighted hum. "You think he doesn't know?" My breath caught in my throat. She smiled, slow and taunting. "You think he doesn't see the way you look at me? The way you sneak glances when you think no one's watching? The way you disappear for hours, only to return with guilt written all over your face?" She leaned in, her lips ghosting over my ear. "You think he doesn't know his son has been fucking his wife?" My entire body went rigid. "No," I breathed. "You're lying." She pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, and in that moment, I saw it. The truth. My father knew. Somewhere, deep down. I had always felt the weight of his gaze. The way he would pause when looking at me, the way his expression would darken when Evelyn and I were in the same room. The way he had started drinking more, staying out later. I had convinced myself it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid, but now the truth was undeniable. He had known, and he had done nothing. I stumbled back, shaking my head. No, no, he wouldn't just. He loves me, Evelyn said simply. He loves me enough to pretend he doesn't see what's right in front of him, because admitting it would mean losing me. And he's not willing to do that. I wanted to scream, to destroy everything in my path. But all I could do was stand there, my hands clenched at my sides, my entire world unraveling piece by piece. Evelyn let out a soft, almost pitying sigh. You see, Adrian, there's no one to save you from this. Not him, not yourself. You belong to me now. My chest ached, my lungs struggling to draw in air. You won't get away with this. Her smile widened. Oh, darling, I already have. I turned, forcing my feet to move, forcing my body to escape before she could pull me back in. I had to leave. I had to get out of this house, out of her reach, out of this nightmare she had created. I barely made it to the door before her voice stopped me once more. Where will you go, Adrian? I froze. She took a step closer. You think you can run from this? From me? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. You can leave, she said, almost playfully. You can disappear for weeks, months, years even. But it won't change the truth. I closed my eyes, willing myself not to listen. You'll come back, she whispered. My hands clenched into fists. You'll always come back. And I knew with a sinking, gut-wrenching certainty that she was right.